Hello and welcome to See People Live. This is a chance for you, as our See People users, to get in touch with, talk to, and have something to say and ask to the most inspirational people that really are out there on the seas today. And today we have maybe people that have blown all of our minds, not just in a week trip or a 2 week trip, but 165 days that they spent rowing across the Pacific. 8,213 miles that Mims and Jess just did from Peru to Australia. Just a little context there. That row across the Pacific was 2,000 hours or more on the oars each. They burned 2.6 million calories during the trip. And if you're wondering what that is, the equivalent of somebody eating a Big Mac for 5 years every single day. That is 2.5 years of the normal calories of a person. And they drank the equivalent of 10 bathtubs, full-size bathtubs worth of water on that trip. So it was an incredible amount of food intake, an incredible amount of time on the oars. We are so happy to have these two with us today to chat about what it means and what it's like to not put up the sails and cross the Pacific, but row, which is a pretty wild thing to even consider doing. So welcome you two. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you so much.
You just told us before we started a little bit about your life since the row. So without getting into too much, where did you land and what has life been? You said it's you've honestly not even caught up on sleep yet. So give us a peek into the what it's like after you hit the ground.
Yeah, so we landed in Cairns Marina and we have been on land for over a week now. But it's actually more exhausting being on land than it is being at sea. We have not stopped. We've been really busy. It's been pretty crazy the amount of traction we've had with interviews on TV and radio. And we've also been sorting out the boat ready for shipping, taking stock takes of all the food that we've got left. Yeah, it's been non-stop.
It seems like you had a pretty incredible team behind you, but there's still a lot that you just have to sort out. I mean, you still have a boat with you, and anybody that's listening that has a boat knows how much maintenance and how much time and energy goes into the boat. I'm assuming as the boat sits at a dock, it gets dirty and that has to be dealt with. You've got issues with like, I would assume, and maybe I'm wrong, but is that boat something that is easily tied up to a dock? Is it fragile? How do you think that compares to maybe some of our people that are used to coming into a marina and tying up a sailboat and putting out an offender?
Yeah, the boat has gone off today down to Brisbane, then to get a ship back to the UK. But there was a lot of cleaning to do when we touched the dock, and luckily we actually didn't do that much of it. We had a lot of family and friends that did it, which was really nice because there were some quite manky lockers where a bit of a wave would get in, and then you'd have maybe like a burst ration or like a bag of nuts that had fallen open and just fallen down, and you just couldn't clean it out. And our central locker was pretty disgusting. It's not the best design bit in the center. It's not very watertight. So all the water and like food crumbs and dead flying fish and the blood from when we caught the tuna just kind of like leaking there. And we'd pump it out once a week, but it would just be, yeah, we had our emergency water in there and it was just growing fur on it pretty much every week.
You're living in this boat. You're getting used to what it smells like. When you get there and family steps aboard or press, is there any moment when people are like, "Oh my gosh!" I mean, what does it actually smell like down in those cabins?
It's so funny because we didn't really think that it smelt bad at all. And we thought all of our clothes smelt fine and they were all nice and dry. And I think after we'd had showers and returned back to the boat, we were like, oh my goodness, like everything's just covered in black mold and everything's just damp and salty. And that was all of our clean clothes and towels and stuff. We we're like, this doesn't make any sense. We did feel pretty bad getting family to clean the boat out, but we were just exhausted.
It's like doing an Arctic expedition or some kind of crazy desert crossing, but almost worse because it is wet and damp. And then obviously, like you said, you add a little bit of tuna blood to the mix and it gets extra ripe. Where,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I'm just looking here and I've got one of my moldy dry bags. You can probably see all the black mold on it.
Nice.
It's just absolutely covered.
So let's back up a little bit. A lot of people have dreams to cross oceans. I think a lot of our listeners consider it, right? Even if they're out on a day sail in San Francisco or in London and they're out sailing around or out on their power boat, they look at the horizon and they go, wow, how nice would it be to just keep going, leave work behind, not go to work on Monday. You obviously had that same dream. Your dream just was a little different. And I say that with some irony because it was incredibly different than what most people think about when they think about crossing an ocean. Was it ever a dream to do anything but row? Like, was this I want to cross oceans and then the rowing came, or did you always start with a rowing mission? I'll start with you, Jess.
So I had known about ocean rowing for a while. My dad had actually done one of the Atlantic rowing races back in 2005, back when it was called the Woodvale race from La Gomera to Antigua. So I was quite young then. I'd known about it for a while. I also did a bit of rowing on the river at school, and I'd known that I always wanted to do an ocean row. And I also worked on super yachts and spent many years in Antigua watching all of the boats come in at the end of each race. And I just thought, gosh, I've got to do this. So yeah, I did the Atlantic in 2022 and absolutely loved my time out there, decided that it wasn't long enough and why not try take on the Pacific.
When Antigua is interesting because I spent a couple seasons there as well when I worked in the yachting industry, and there it's kind of the graveyard for some of these rowing boats, right? Like Nelson's Dockyard, I think has a couple that are just kind of sitting there rotting away. They're almost there as statues and monuments, but it kind of becomes a graveyard. Why is Antigua such a hot spot to land for rowing? Is it because the island's accepting of it, or is it because it's actually the perfect landing spot with the currents?
I think anywhere in the Caribbean is a really good landing spot with the currents and the trade winds. I'm not exactly sure why Antigua is the first choice, but yeah, it has been for many years.
And then your choice to land in Cairns there in Australia, is that an ideal spot? Is that strategic as far as the row goes, or is that based on family or dreams?
Yeah, so we actually didn't really know where we were going to land. We just thought, oh, it's a big East Coast. We'll just
Okay.
go where the wind takes us and where our weather router directs us. And we're not going to fight the conditions, so we'll just go the quickest and the easiest route. We kind of said Brisbane because it was probably the closest, but it became quite clear before we got to Samoa and Fiji that we were going to have unfavourable winds, and it was, even though it was 500 miles longer to go to Cairns and to Brisbane, it was going to be quicker because we wouldn't be fighting the conditions. And if we were to try and go to Brisbane or anywhere like that, we'd probably have to put the parachute anchor out more often.
So a little context for anybody listening. We ran the numbers from our SeaPeople users. We've had many Pacific crossings happen under sail. Most people that cross the Pacific on a sailboat cross from Panama to the Marquesas. Typically, they would stop in the Galapagos, but a lot of people are opting to not stop at the Galapagos because of permitting and other issues. But so we ran from the longest that our people are typically crossing, which is Panama to the Marquesas. That averaged from our SeaPeople users that have tracked 4,100 miles to 4,200 miles. So somewhere kind of in that range is where they typically are. You doubled that with your arms and legs. And their typical their typical sail across the Pacific average between 22 and 28 days going from Panama to the Marquesas. So the Marquesas is essentially halfway across to where you both went. You'd done the Atlantic. The Atlantic is not nearly as vast. Was the Atlantic good prep, or did you actually, when you put your hands on those oars the first time and those first couple strokes away from Peru, did that Atlantic crossing strike fear into what you were about to undertake, or was it something that made you feel ultra prepared?
I think so with the Atlantic race and it being something that's organised, there's about 40 boats that take part in it every year. They give you a full equipment list, a list of things that you need to cover in training, a load of RYA courses that you need to complete. And so we had a pretty good baseline to work off, and we pretty much used that. Obviously our row was quite a bit longer. I mean, my Atlantic one was 42 days, so a little bit smaller than this one, but yeah, I feel like we learned a lot on the Atlantic. I mean, Mims did the Atlantic row solo, I did it as a 4, so Mims took 59 days. But yeah, I mean, I think anybody who wants to do an ocean row should definitely go and do an organized race first before they do an independent one.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. I mean, For the 0.0001% of people out here that are going to bite that off, that's a great tip. So then you have a dream, you want to do it. Let's just kind of skip forward. You've done the Atlantic. You think, okay, we've done the Atlantic. Now to the Pacific. Where and how in the world do you, A, convince sponsors to get involved and start to budget something like this? Are you comfortable telling us about what it costs to pull off a trip like this Pacific crossing?
Yeah, so this was like all the organization was actually really hard because so few people have done it. There was very few people to ask for advice, and a lot of the experts were saying like different things in terms of what boat design we should get, or what route we should take, or what time of year we should leave. So it was, yeah, trying to figure out, okay, how much food do we actually need to budget for? How long might it take us? What that is all going to cost. So I think our budget was around sort of 200 to 250K, we reckoned it cost. Trying to think, we thought sponsorship would actually be easier because we both did like well out of our Atlantic crossings in terms of just results. But it was so hard still. And I think just like global climate as well, there's everything going on in Ukraine. There was sort of a change in government and leadership in the UK, and all those kind of things I think had a bit of a knock-on effect. And a lot of the companies just weren't wanting to spend. Just trying to get meetings with people is really hard. We'd spend hours and hours every day just either on LinkedIn sending requests or just sending emails or calling people up and just trying to get people to listen to our vision. And we'd have meetings with some people and they'd be like, oh, I'll get back to you in a week, and then they just would never say anything. And we'd sort of rather have a no than a no answer at all. So that was, I mean, they always say in ocean rowing the hardest part is getting to the start line, and I think it was pretty much a nail on the head with that one for this crossing.
Is the boat you have, is it used, or do you design that from scratch for yourselves?
So our boat had already done 2 Atlantic crossings, so we bought it secondhand. But our boat's a slower design that's more sturdy, I suppose, and a bit more spacious. It's actually usually rowed by a team of 4, so it's a bit tough to get around. There are boats now that are made of carbon fiber that weigh a third of what ours does.
So yours is fiberglass.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you ship that to your starting location on some sort of a ship?
Yeah, so we sent Velocity in a 40-foot container, and then had to send the food separately, so food and the medicine separate.
Yeah. How much extra food? I mean, you obviously have got a provision for the worst, right? How much extra food did you take, and did you way over plan?
So we packed for 200 days at sea to have 5,000 calories each per day, and that was mainly freeze-dried and dehydrated meals. Plus, we made our own porridge, and then we would have 1,500 calories a day of snacks. So that's biltong, nuts, dried fruit, chocolate, biscuits, that kind of thing. We both really struggled with the dehydrated and freeze-dried food. It's just really not very enjoyable. There's no texture to it. It's like mush. It just does not make you feel good. And I don't think it can be very good for you to survive on that for such a long period of time.
Yeah.
And we have got so much food left over. It's ridiculous.
They all smell the same as well. And then if they're out in the sun for too long, they have this, I think you'll understand if you've ever had it for a long period of time, but it goes fizzy if it's left out for too long. And that is the only way to describe it, where it just tastes fizzy. I don't know how to explain it, where it's just been out for too long, and they all taste the same when that happens.
This is maybe you can't make a better MRE is what we call them, or freeze-dried meal, but maybe this is like your next calling, which is, okay, you did the ultimate test of this food, or you can judge the next Great British Baking that is for people that are making this kind of stuff. What do you think when you're out there and it's the middle of the night, you're on watch by yourself, you're staring at a billion stars, you ate something that you didn't really like? Can each of you walk us through whether it was the beginning, middle, or end? But Jess, I'll start with you. Can you walk us through maybe your lowest point while you were out there, or did you even have one where you just were really maybe lost or bummed, or however you maybe got?
I think there were a lot of days where we felt quite frustrated because Everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong on the boat. We obviously had to restart our expedition after our rudder broke. So we basically found out that it had been totally delaminated. It was a manufacturing error and it totally split open and it was floating to the top of the water. They'd basically left the peel ply on the inside, so it separated from the foam core. And we were like, it's fine, we've got a spare rudder, we'll fix it. Anyway, the same thing had started to happen with the spare rudder. So that's when we were like, okay, well, we've got a dagger board, let's drill some holes into the dagger board. Anyway, I think 2.5 days later, we'd snapped all of our drill bits with our hand drill and just could not get any holes into this dagger board to put it into the rudder housing. And so it dawned on us that we were needing to get rescued. And we'd met Alec Hughes actually through the SeaPeople app and spent pretty much every single day with him when we were in Peru. He was an absolute savior, and there was no doubt about it that he offered to come and rescue us. And he'd literally just set off for his circumnavigation and he sailed a whole week out of his way to get to us. We were on parachute anchor for a whole week, and then he towed us really slowly because rowing boats are just not meant to be towed, and we couldn't steer it either. He towed us at about 3 to 4 knots all the way 350 miles all the way back to Lima, Peru. And if he hadn't done that, we would have had to abandon the boat and the expedition, and perhaps we would have been able to be picked up, but he absolutely saved our expedition.
Yeah, you're on a race against the clock. So anybody that's listening that doesn't know, there's seasons where this is doable and seasons where it's not, right? Because of cyclones, because of wind patterns, because of all kinds of things. I want to get into that rescue in depth here in a minute. And I think we actually going to bring over Alec into the conversation, which is going to be really awesome. Mims, I want to ask you the same question because whether it's a 24-hour passage, an Atlantic crossing, or a trip to the Caribbean, I think all offshore sailors can relate to a low point, right? Whether it's some would say it's the stress of getting ready to depart and that rock in your gut for the week leading up or the day before that becomes an immense amount of stress, or a moment of loneliness. Or for me, a couple times it's been when you get that satellite message that something's happening at home that you feel like you're supposed to be there for and you can't be. Where were you maybe at your most vulnerable out there?
Yeah, I think it's got to be on the second attempt. So we were so excited for the second attempt. We're like, right, we've turned it around. We've managed, like with all of us and Alec and our support team back home, we've managed to pull off this sort of restart. And so we were so excited to get back out there and finally do this thing we'd set out to. And then on sort of a couple of days in, we were like, this power is not holding, like the batteries are dropping at night. I think like some of the support team at home didn't believe us and were like, it's just cloud cover, like get it for the next few days and it'll be fine. But we were like, no, the power's not holding. And every night it just started getting worse, didn't it? So we just slowly started switching off all our equipment, all the electronics until we were pretty much dead ship. We were doing a lot of hand steering, which we've got like a little, our system's hydraulic. So there was a little wheel next to stern. So you'd row and then you'd balance the oar on your hand and then just do a little twist of the wheel every few strokes. And then it burst, and we sent a picture back home to our safety officer. He'd sent it to a guy, Jim from Aquamarine, who anybody in the UK will know. He's an absolute legend of water makers and know everything there is to know about them. And he said, oh yeah, whoever installed it has installed it with the wrong pipes and they're not rated for the pressure. So it's absolutely going to keep bursting. And because obviously we didn't expect that to happen, we didn't have enough length of pipe to replace all the sections. We'd put the spare pipe in. The one that we couldn't replace, we wrapped it in tape. And then in a few days, somebody suggested wrapping it in rope, doing whipping twine and cable ties, everything. And it was just a few weeks in, and there was one week where the pipes had burst about 2 or 3 times and we were hand steering all day. And in the beginning off Peru, we had a lot of beam on conditions and waves coming at us from the sideways. And you're trying to repair this pipe, which is in the most awkward part of the boat possible, in the hatch. So you're trying to do contortionism to try and get into the hatch and repair the pipe. Meanwhile, somebody's trying to hand steer and you've got no power. So I think in some of those days, we used to just look at each other and say, what have we done to deserve this? And you're just faced with the reality of potentially hand pumping our water for 8,000 miles and hand steering. And if anybody's used a hand water maker pump, it makes 3 litres an hour as opposed to 30 that our Schenker does. So we found it harder than rowing.
Yeah.
And we were just like, oh my God, this is gonna be absolutely brutal.
The survival aspect is so much a part of this beyond just the physical aspect, right? There is an element of survival and physical and mental, which is, I think, what's intriguing to anybody. And I think why everybody on the SeaPeople app was so intrigued to follow this. And your emails, when I would send a newsletter out about that had you all in it, it got double the open rate of other things. And it was really cool to see how engaged they were because I think they could relate, right? They know how much their lives suck sometimes offshore. And they're thinking about you all in the equivalent of what we may have as a dinghy as far as how far above the water you are and the speed that you're going out there for 165 days. It's mind-boggling. Okay, so you start. Let's talk about the disaster, we'll call it, and the rescue. We will show you the track line from where you guys got going and when you turned around. The rudder issue happens. It's great. It's documented in a wonderful episode on Sailing the Vagabond coming up, so make sure you check that out, where there's some great footage and some great interviews with Jess and Mims and Alec on this rescue. You have to turn around. Alec, somebody you met on the app, is willing to come take you and tow you back to shore, which is kind of crazy. Obviously, sailors are there to help each other, but the amount of time that it takes and the potential to kind of ruin his crossing, right? Let's say something had gone bad or his boat was damaged or it just took way too long and he missed his window. Get you back to shore, and then the scramble is on. So was there a team there on shore that was starting to get some of the new rudders sorted out? Was it already en route shipping wise? Were you fairly confident when you hit shore that you're going to be able to turn this around and get going again? Or was there an unknown on whether or not the trip and the record attempt were over?
Sorry, do you want to go?
Yeah, we were really lucky. We had our support team just organised everything for us. We had 4 rudders made. Is it 4?
I think we didn't actually know a lot of what was going on. I think they hid a lot from us to try and take the stress off. So we didn't know how many rudders were getting made for us.
But yeah, we had 4 carbon fiber indestructible rudders made, and everybody back home was just working through the night to get the epoxy dried up and the next layer put on. But yeah, so we had a team fly out, and yeah, our parents were a massive part of making it all happen. We had a safety officer as well who organised everything with Alec and organised the tow. But yeah, we had, I think, maybe 5 days that we had to turn the boat around. So literally as soon as we arrived, we were taken in by Yacht Club Peruano, who supported us from the beginning. And we were in the supermarket that evening going provisioning to buy all the food that we'd eaten. And we knew that we didn't have a lot of time to get the boat ready to set off again.
But yeah, just to add to that, because Velocity was a bit of a special case. There were no molds in the UK of the rudder.
Yeah, that was my next question. How did they build that? How did they build that, not having the other one to template?
I was trying to measure this rudder housing and the gap in the rocking boat. So I was very stressed in case my measurements were really wrong. I did it about 10 times and was just trying to drew out a cross section of, and would mark like centimeter intervals, measure sort of length and measure the width at centimeter intervals. And so I was very stressed about that in case the measurements were wrong. But Ben from, so I think it is, a family friend of ours, found him, I think, and then got him to get the rudders made, and then obviously had the team working through the night, and then he flew out with them, brought some bits and pieces and supplies, and luckily the rudders fit, shaved down one for the dagger board, because the dagger board and the rudders are pretty much interchangeable on the boat. But I think, yeah, we all breathed a sigh of relief when we knew that they fit.
Yeah. And you had a tape measure. You actually had a tape measure out there, or were you measuring that and going, well, it's the knuckle to the end of the fingernail? That's cool. Yeah, so I want to actually, Sarah, if you can bring Alec over. I've got a couple questions for Alec, this absolute legend of a human being that, as Mims and Jess have said, absolutely saved the trip and towed you all back. I think it was upwind as well, correct? You were not able to sail much. It was a lot of motoring or a lot of tacking.
Yeah, Alec did sail, I think, pretty much all the way. I think there was no fuel left. It was just an unexpected trip for him. And I don't think a rowing boat has ever gone so fast upwind.
Yeah, that's one of my first questions. Alec, I just invited you to come over here as a panelist. It's not working. All right, Alec, we'll try again in a second. Quick question for you then, Jess and Mims. Maybe you can answer this one. That's what I was going to ask him. I noticed in the post that you were always riding in the boat as opposed to hopping on the sailboat. You stayed in the rowing boat the whole time. Why was that? Did you need to keep steering the boat? Was there a space issue on the sailboat?
Yeah, so initially it was to steer, and our safety officer said you need to be on to steer it. But obviously towing an ocean rowing boat in the opposite sort of direction to how it's usually going and faster than we'd be able to row it, we weren't going to be able to steer because obviously we had no rudder. We couldn't even make a temporary rudder with the dagger board. And our safety officer had suggested maybe just putting an oar in the water and doing it that way. But it became quite clear that we couldn't steer it. And it was to see if there were any problems with the boat, if any leaks in. The vents on the hatches you can get waves and stuff in them. So to be able to bail out the water and just keep an eye on the boat, really. We were quite stressed. I mean, Alec did such a good job, but we were quite stressed because obviously an ocean rowing boat isn't meant to be towed usually, not at that speed. So it sounded very different to how it would usually go when we're rowing. So we would often, if we were on sort of not on watch or just asleep in the cabin, we'd just sort of be sat there like that, be like, we don't like the noises it's making, and just praying that the bow is still attached.
Yeah, and also like with our power issues and the fact that the solar panels are just on the top of the cabins and really close to the water, there was just salt water constantly going over the top of them. So we needed to be there to clean the solar panels, to be able to keep the navigation light on, because there were actually a couple of times in the trip when fishermen who didn't know what they were doing tried to cut between us. And we were just crazy on the radio with Alec, just yelling at them and blowing horns and all sorts.
What's the longest stretch you think you went without seeing a boat? So when you're near shore, and especially in South America, the fishing boats go an unbelievable distance offshore sometimes, especially for the size boats that they're in. But what do you think the longest stretch you had true, I mean, just absolute nothingness, no boats in sight?
So on our second attempt, Alec actually came and stopped and said hello on his way past to the Marquesas on day 20. Between day 20 and that, it was probably 100 days before we saw
I think so.
Saw another boat, probably more so before one was close enough to radio. We think we saw maybe we didn't have anything coming up on our AIS really, did we? Mind you, that was turned off on the second attempt. So maybe there were a few things that passed in the night that we didn't realize, but yeah, I think it was at least 100 days.
And it's just a little background here. The record that they are, is the record actually official yet, by the way? Have you gotten any confirmation of that being confirmed?
It's they're all still waiting to be verified, but they said when you reach land, it looks like it'll be this.
Great. So the record is an unassisted, non-stop Pacific crossing. So in other words, when they restarted, they mentioned that Alec went by and gave him a wave, but I'm sure you guys are very careful that there's records in play here. So it's not like Alec could pop up and step on board and they could hop on for a quick cocktail. They were very much on an unassisted nonstop mission, which makes this, I mean, the record, I'm not sure how much it matters to you. It's kind of interesting from an outsider's perspective when I think about what you took on. If other people had done this in the past, it would be equally as exciting. But the fact that nobody's done it makes you realize what an unbelievable accomplishment this is. What if you had that rudder issue and had to divert? Would that have completely changed things for you? Like if there's not a whole lot of places to stop on the route you took, but let's say mid-Atlantic, you'd had to divert, or you'd had to take a tow, or you'd had to do something as opposed to within the first few days. Yeah, talk me through. Did you ever think about that as compared to when you had your issues?
Yeah, I think it would have been quite tough if, I guess we were lucky that our rudder did break really close to Peru and we were in international waters and we drifted pretty far. But I think we probably would have tried to do it again. I mean, there was no way that we were going to give up. And there was a point that we were thinking, oh, our water maker pipes have burst and we don't have any. It's such an easy fix. If we had the right pipe, we could potentially stop off the Marquesas. But we were just like, no, we're going to hand pump water the whole way. We want to do this nonstop and unsupported.
We talked about the calories that you ate. You talked about how the food was hard to get down. So clearly there's maybe not a big food sponsor that you have to talk about how the food was so wonderful and you enjoyed it so much. But how much do you feel like your body's changed? I mean, that's a ton of time. I mean, most people only dream of of having that much fitness, over the course of years. There's also a lot of calories being burned and maybe not as much being brought in. Do you actually prep by trying to put on some weight before a trip like this? Not really. How do you prep your body for weight loss, muscle gain, and how much did it change during the course of the trip?
Yeah, it's a really tricky one to plan for because so few people have done crossings of this length. So we took advice from our nutritionist who said to put on quite a bit of weight. We also worked with our PT who's done ocean rows himself and trained me for the Atlantic and trained tons and tons of ocean rowers. And so we were trying to put on as much muscle as possible and also just a lot of strength and conditioning, sort of trunk, core, all those little stabilizing muscles. But we were quite surprised how our bodies reacted, and it's amazing how they adapt. On the Atlantic crossing, which I guess bearing in mind as well, it's a bit more racy, it's a bit punchier. I lost 11 kilos of weight and Jess lost 7. So my Atlantic crossing was 59 days. So we were expecting to lose tons of weight. We barely lost anything. And so we were quite surprised, especially given that we really struggled with the rations. We almost never managed our full rations, probably averaged about 3,000 to 3,500 calories a day. So we don't know whether some of it's partly the body kind of being in a bit of a survival mode and it'll just hold on to the fat because we really struggled to eat it. We're not really quite sure, but we were really surprised about the lack of weight that we lost given the amount of hours. I mean, we were doing between 12 and 16 hours a day.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of those things where it's like you take a before picture, right? And then you take the after picture, you do the side by side, like in a survival show, and see the amount of change. But I think Sarah and I actually complimented or commented on that when you arrived and we were looking at pictures of the arrival. It's like, wow, they look really like for spending 165 days offshore, they look healthy and like that it's all, you know, not any kind of crazy or dramatic changes where you have like Skeletor face or anything like that from how much weight you've lost. But it's something that I think food wise, it's so different for your average SeaPeople user and even Alec. I think that was the juxtaposition of you two for that 8 days getting back was what was kind of interesting. I'm looking at pictures of you still on your rowboat under tow. They're on a proper sailing yacht, and you're thinking about, okay, there's hot coffee happening on that sailboat. There's big hot meals. What's happening on the rowboat kind of brought the differences between what you all were doing and what we do as sailors kind of to the forefront there.
Mm.
At night, is there ever a break where you're both completely taking off? So this is a highly contested thing in sailing crossings, which is somebody always on watch, somebody always up. We have a lot more power and the ability to have radars running all the time with alarms and AIS alarms and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. But there's a lot of people that would always have somebody on deck and on watch. And then there are a lot of people that trust their electronics, and especially in areas where they know they're not going to see ships for long periods of time, are totally comfortable going down for long stretches of sleep. You have to keep a boat moving, right? You are the power. You've got no sails and no engine. So are there times when you both just need a break and you throw that para anchor out and you are both sleeping, or is somebody truly rowing at all points in time?
Yeah, we needed to keep the boat moving forwards at all times. Yeah, we ended up towards the end actually just rowing together all day because it's so hot in those cabins. It's like a sauna and you've got no airflow because you need to have the cabin hatches at all times and you've just got this tiny little air vent. Just because if you do capsize and the cabin hatch is open and it floods, the boat's just not going to self-right. So yeah, we'd be rowing on deck together all day towards the end, and then at night time 2 hours on, 2 hours off. And we felt that we needed to have somebody on watch at all times because we didn't have our navigation light on, we didn't have our radio on, no AIS, chart plotter was off, all the electronics were off. We tried to keep our auto ham on. That was sort of the most important thing for us, and also having enough power to charge our little Garmin InReach device so that we could contact our weather router every day, and also enough power to make a little bit of in the middle of the day. But yeah, it was pretty tough. I think the sleep deprivation was the hardest part for me, and I constantly fell asleep whilst I was rowing, especially when we had black palm days and there were no waves going over you. You didn't really have to concentrate in trying to get your oars in the water, and it just made it so hard to stay awake.
The picture of the blisters on your hands, I think, is another great reality check for anybody that has any illusions that this isn't truly painful too, right? You're battling sleep, but you're also battling things like blisters on your hands and I'm sure aches and pains. I mean, you're rowing with your legs, your back, your arms, your entire body and over. And then you're not sleeping on a Tempur-Pedic, memory foam mattress that is a great night's sleep. And you also mentioned the heat. So the toll on your bodies is real. Do you feel like you haven't, you said you haven't caught up on sleep, but do you feel like your otherwise sunburns and blisters have essentially healed at this point?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I didn't think the hand picture was too bad actually. But yeah, you do get really calloused. And then there's some days when especially when it's slow conditions and you're having to row a lot harder, your hands do just ache and it's a lot of just like joint pain. It is just amazing how the body adapts. And I think in the beginning you'd fall asleep and if you had a knee a bit bent, it would take sort of 5 minutes to straighten it out when you got up for your shift. But mostly okay healed now. I do have a lot of scars from salt sores. Those are pretty brutal a lot of the time. It is weird because we didn't walk for 5.5 months or more like 6 because if you count the first attempt and with just the 5 days on land, it's not a lot. So it did weirdly wasn't quite as bad as our Atlantic crossings, even though it was longer. And we've done a lot of steps since we've been on land, but it's just little things like bending down for things. Obviously, we couldn't do that on the boat because you just fall over. So, a bit of backache here and there. And I thought 3 or 4 days in after just walking for 5-10 minutes or standing for too long, your back would start to hurt. So it's just kind of those things that's just a motion that you're not, anything that's not a rowing motion, just not quite supple at doing.
When you start getting close to land, a lot of people that have climbed giant mountains and done huge expeditions. I'm not even going to compare what you did to most sails. I'd rather compare it in this context to these kind of in insanely long and arduous expeditions that people do in remote places. And a lot of those people in interviews and documentaries talk about what happens when they start getting close, when they can see the end and they know that this mission and this journey is about to be over and this strange desire for it not to end. There are some stories of sailors that got close to an around the world, solo race end and kept going because they weren't ready for reality. They weren't ready for shore life, the stresses and all of that. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of balancing if you had those feelings and what it was like balancing the excitement to get on shore and bend over to pick things up and take a walk with kind of knowing that this moment in time is about to be over?
Yeah, for sure. I think once we passed the halfway point, I was quite sad really because we were sort of counting down the miles and yeah, getting closer and closer to the finish, and I just never wanted it to end. And actually, it felt like our bodies just started to break down a bit the last few weeks because we knew that the end was in sight. We were just both getting even more tired, and we got to a point where we weren't able to wake up to our alarms, and we were getting up to 5 wake-up calls from each other saying, wake up, you're on shift. And you'd start getting up, you'd sit up and you'd start, I don't know, putting your foul weather gear on. And then you'd be fast back asleep again. And it wouldn't make any sense because the person rowing would see the torchlight from a phone because we didn't have enough power for the cabin lights. Turn on, you'd be like, okay, they're ready. So yeah, being blonde, it's just been so busy that we've not even had time to reflect, but we've already been saying like, oh, should we just go back out?
Yeah.
But it's weird, I think, because in some ways, with the amount of problems we had, we didn't even think about the finish because we were like, there's just going to be more and it's just going to come in a barrage because we've had, I guess the 3 major problems that you don't want is damage to like the boat with the rudder damage and having to get rescued, the water maker and power issues. It's like the 3 big problems you don't want. So we're like, there's going to be something else. And so I think we just chose or like didn't let ourselves think about the finish for so long because we were like, we might just be forced to divert to an island or something else might happen out of our control. And then, so I think in some ways when we got closer, we were like relieved and so excited. And also there's an element of it's going to be really nice because we don't have to be stressed all the time about managing all these issues and just trying to like you say, survive every day and make sure we have enough power to run the water maker and just manage all those problems. But yeah, in the last 2 weeks, like Jess said, it's like your mind, and I had it on my Atlantic crossing, your mind basically tells you you're there, but you've just got to finish that last little bit. And a couple of 100 miles is nothing in the grand scheme of things,
Right.
but you've still got to finish it off and get to the dock.
Yeah, and actually the last 4 hours of the crossing were really brutal. Probably the hardest we had to row actually the whole way. So we were facing headwinds on the way in. We could literally see land. We were,
It's
yeah,
like 20 knots.
yeah, we had 20 knot headwinds,
forecast.
and yeah, the forecast had changed, and we was like, if we'd have known this, we would have like put the ground anchor in and waited. And we had family came out on a helicopter to come and see us, which was amazing because we didn't know they were coming, and it just was circling us. And we're like, oh, it must be our family that have come out to see us. And then they also took little dinghies out, and they were all getting absolutely drenched on these tiny little ribs. We were absolutely covered in salt. And we'd had a little wash at 4 a.m. in the morning because we thought we wanted to look nice to the finish line, and that was a waste of
Salt
time.
crystals everywhere.
But yeah, so the last 4 hours was just really tough, and we were getting blown out of the channel. We got told by some people who'd come past us, you need to stay 4 meters inside the channel markers, otherwise it's really shallow and you're going to run aground. And we just got blown out the channel as soon as we entered it, and we were just like, oh my gosh, this can't be happening. We're hand steering as well, so I actually can't. Mims can reach the wheel and rest the oar on her wrist, but I can't reach it. So it's a bit of an interesting one for me.
But we couldn't swap because we needed both of us on the oars, because as soon as you put the oars down or like stop for even a second,
Go
you would
backwards.
just go even further, even further out.
So we thought, oh my gosh, like we're potentially going to run aground, and we were making a plan. We were like, right, we might have to throw the anchor out and swim ashore with all the crocodiles and the sharks.
You did I mean, we don't know what happens down in the boat, but everything that we saw, and from the way it seems like you both interact now, you did a spectacular job preserving a friendship through the whole thing. And I think that's something that all sailors that are not solo sailors, whether you are in a marriage, whether it's two friends, whether it's a budding romance, whatever it is, balancing a relationship between two people on a boat is hard. Your lives are so intertwined in a way that people on shore don't really understand. And you pretty much locked yourself in the equivalent of the space of a car and slept in it. And every once in a while got out and pushed the car instead of using the motor, if that helps people understand. Was there a trick or a tip or anything that you could share? Jess, you've done this row, or an Atlantic row with 4 people total. Where and how do you balance the friendship dynamics and not let arguments boil over? And yeah, talk to us a little bit about remaining friends.
I think it's really important to listen to each other, because everyone's always going to have their own ideas and opinions. And rather than having a fight about it, I think, yeah, you need to talk about solutions, because at the end of the day, like, we both had the same mission to get to the other side safely. And yeah, I don't know, we just really got on well and both really chilled and relaxed. And if we needed a bit of time on our own, then we had that. Even if we were rowing together during the day, we'd sometimes switch off and put headphones in. And yeah, we were lucky. It could have gone pretty badly wrong.
Yeah, and I think to add that in terms of tips, a friend of ours said, and who's also an ocean rowing coach, is have a mission statement and then stick to that. So if there is anything that comes up, you just refer back to that mission statement. And luckily we never needed to refer to that. Like Jess says, we always had the same goals, and like she says, we're not always going to agree, but we could communicate and explain why we thought something was a good idea or not a good idea. And so yeah, I think if it's like a big crew, a mission statement is a really good idea. And we had these little wristbands on our wrists with that written on the inside as well, just to remind us like why we're here and why we're doing it.
I think you probably know each other as far as the amount of waking hours you've spent with each other, the problems you've had to solve with each other, the deep and intimate looks into each other's lives and feelings and emotions, and how you handle things, more so than most people will probably have with a spouse over decades, with the amount of waking hours that you actually spent with each other. And you did it all and came out the other side friends, which I think is something that's the book that I would read, because I think that's what all these experiences we have with each other are so much better with someone, and they mean so much more. And balancing that relationship when it comes to the ocean and stresses of the ocean and time offshore is an art. And so I think what you all did on the surface is incredible, but the human element of balancing life with another person for that long in that kind of a situation is something that is absolutely wild. I want to try to bring over Alec one more time. For anybody that's just joining us, Alec is the individual that diverted his trip across the Pacific to rescue Jess and Mims on their first attempt across the Pacific after a rudder break left them stranded, and then spent 8 days sailing to windward back to Peru. Alec, how are you?
Hey, sorry about that disconnect a while ago. Hello, girls. Hello, guys. I'm here in the middle
Hello.
of the Indian
And it looks-
Ocean. Your next ocean, girls.
Wow, here's a little peek into technology in 2025, which is it is 6:58 in the morning in North Carolina. Jess and Mims are in Australia. Sarah, who's producing tonight or today, is in Europe. And Alec is literally underway in the ocean, no land in sight. It's unbelievable. Alec, really quick, I do just want to ask you a couple questions. One, I think for all of us that were following this story unfold live, we all put ourselves in your shoes. Most of us on the SeaPeople app are sailors, powerboaters, but we're from the boat side. It was so exciting to have Jess and Mims tracking and giving us updates about their row. But I think a lot of us were more easily able to put ourselves in your shoes in this situation and think about what it means. Sometimes on a passage, you don't want to make a little change here or there that's going to cost you a knot or cost you a few hours. You're always trying to maximize speed and go. And you did the polar opposite, which was came, grabbed the girls, and then went 8 days in the wrong direction with a bunch of unknowns ahead of you. I guess my question is, were you really fearful for their lives if you didn't come do that? Was it a rescue mission for you that there's some real danger here? Or was it more of, these are my friends, I think I can help them the most, and I want to see this record happen?
It's a mix of both. Like, really, for me, for them having to end their project because of the new Peruvian Navy couldn't rescue them. They would rescue them, but not the boat. So they didn't have another option, one. And number two, I thought about it. I was going to go to Hawaii, which is the place I went to college and everything. And I said, these people have been 3-4 months with me. They're my buddies. They're my friends. They have their dreams. So that's why I connected with both things, the end of the thing. And it was really interesting because the other thing I thought it was going to be better for me to try the boat too. And that helped me too. And it helped them too. So it was a win-win situation if you think about it, really.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. And you guys had met earlier on in the app. Not to sit here and do an app ad, but you'd met earlier on. What was the reason? How did you all connect initially?
It was really cool because Jess wrote to a bunch of friends in Peru, sailors too, and the club announced that these British girls were coming, but on November. And I just got the boat on October, November, so I was ready to be their friends because I knew I know how horrible it is for logistics in a project like this, And I've been a sailor all my life, and I knew that it was going to be difficult for them. So I thought I need to be with them for this. And they've just talked about a certain part of it. The way before everything I heard about the logistics, the bureaucracy of customs in Peru, they should write a book, man. I told them this before. It was really difficult. So 3-4 months with them, why not? Totally helping them. Yeah, it was great. And SeaPeople was part of the first messages that Jess sent us and everything and sent me. And then I got hooked with the app because I started to look at the evolution of it. You guys I come from software. So I know what it is to get a closed user group. I know what it is to get new, this statistics right now I'm using for everything. I know it helps for voting. So really, you guys are doing a really good job getting these girls in this call and everything, really. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah,
Thank you for
absolutely.
that.
Well, it's awesome to speak to you in real life, Alec. Once again, there's an incredible kind of small piece. It's a few minutes, but it's a little mini documentary about this rescue and this trip that is coming out in a Sailing La Vagabond episode in a few days here. So if you're listening to this and it's a month from now or 2 months from now, you can go back and search for it on Sailing La Vagabond's YouTube channel. And hopefully in that, through the interviews with Jess and Mims when they were still offshore, as well as Alec, and some great video footage, we can piece together exactly what unfolded out there. And yeah, really excited to get Alex's face on here so everybody can meet the legend behind this story
Thank you.
that kept this row on track. And I think, as Jess and Mims had said, possibly is the reason why this record came to fruition.
The girls are the best. They really inspire everybody, and especially trying to help kids build their dreams and their adventures. That's the most important part. Get kids on board, you know? So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks, Alec. Have a safe sail. Looks like you're moving right now. It looks like you got some good speed on, and you're downwind, which looks like a good ride.
Thank you.
All
Aloha.
right. Take care. Well, there's no taking away from what you guys did. There's that this record happened because of the two people that are sitting right there, and your arms and your legs and your brains. It's really cool to see how another person got involved and helped keep that on track. And it was just really cool to see it all unfold in front of our eyes with track lines and with some of the updates you guys did, like little things I never knew existed, like your little solar grower that you were growing some fresh greens in, it looked like, and other things like that were just really cool to get those updates. And just to what we were talking about with Alec, the technology and the ability to stay in touch was just wild. Did you have all that same kind of communication when you did the Atlantic crossing, or did anything change for you technologically between the Atlantic and the Pacific?
For me, on my Atlantic row, we took a BGAN, but it didn't work. So we weren't able to send any content back, and we didn't have any social media happening. We had 3 minutes each of time to use on the satellite phone for the whole duration of the crossing. But so this one was totally different because we took a Starlink, and we were able to turn it on once a week, send content back to our social media team, Coast and Media, and we also had unlimited time on the satellite phones.
Yeah, so I had a bit better connection than Jess on the Atlantic, but it was the same satellite phones. I didn't have the budget for the gun reach, so I was trying to do the old texting method when you have to push the button 3 times if you want to send a message, and also had the BGAN. But I think for this crossing, we had to have the Starlink because to be able to fund the trip, we had to have the sponsors, and with that comes the social media deliverables. So it was quite a lot of pressure on us. Whereas on my Atlantic crossing, I didn't have many sponsors. It was really hard to get the sponsors. So I was just sending all sorts of videos back to my best friend who's just putting all sorts up on social media. So it was very different coming into this because we knew we'd have to do that side of it to keep all the sponsors happy and to try and get new sponsors while we're at sea as well.
How do you top this? Or do you even care to top it? You just are, there's more oceans out there. Is there something next we should know about?
I mean, if you've got any ideas, please send them our way. But I'm sure one day we would love to do the Indian, but I think we might leave it a few years.
Yeah. So what happens now? You've got a lot of press. Your Instagram blew up while you were on this trip. A lot of people look to you now as an inspiring force of nature, which comes with its own responsibilities. Where do you go from here? Do you stay in Australia for a bit? Are you heading home? What's next in life?
Oh, I think the immediate to-do list is just get some sleep. We'll be in Australia for another couple of weeks, and then it's pretty much back to reality in a way. We're trying to sort of figure out what to do next. And we're going to try and do a lot of engagement with schools as well, and go around to some schools and do some talks there, and still promote our charity, the Outward Bound Trust, and showcase the work. Really not too sure specifics on what's going to be next.
Jess, is there a way that people that are listening can help? What's the best way for them to, if they want to give financially or with time or with whatever they can to help you spend more time in schools and spread the message and inspire others?
They can go to our website and they're able to donate to our charity, or also to get in contact with us if they want to organise talks at schools or surf clubs or whatever it is. So that's seastodayoceanrowing.com, www. And it's seas is SEAS.
Awesome. Well, I encourage everybody to hop into the SeaPeople app, go to their profiles. We'll put those up on screen here and put links in the description on YouTube and on the podcasts where you can see the track line. You can see what they did. You can see the photos. You can see the updates. Follow Alec as well. He's currently underway. You can see in-depth statistics about his travels, his trips, as well as videos and photos that are pinned along the track lines, which is what I think is really fun, of seeing where exactly these moments happened when they were happening in the ocean. So thank you both for finding SeaPeople, for being on the platform and sharing this incredible story with us for 166 days while you were out there underway, as well as joining us here today. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I can't wait for everybody in the that is really interested in any sort of a mission, whether you're thinking about going sailing for your first time solo on a lake, or you're thinking about your first day of doing anything that is out of your comfort zone. Lean into Jess and Mim's story, because if you can spend 165 days and in the Pacific Ocean rowing and turn around after being punched in the gut with a break and get going again, it makes everything, it puts everything into perspective. And I hope that everybody can take that inspiration from you too and translate that into anything they want to do, big or small. So thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank
It's been a
you.
pleasure being on.
All right, stay in touch. And yeah, shoot us any links as well that you want to put into any descriptions, anywhere that people can share and donate. And thank you all for being here today. That concludes this episode of SeaPeople Live. It will post on everywhere where you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, so you can watch this live and in person. And yeah, we'll talk to you all soon. Have a great day.